Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's great to be here this afternoon, and thank you for the kind introduction, Nina. Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure it is to host you here in Toronto at one of the more exciting and interesting times in Canada's recent history. Welcoming the world to Toronto for the 2018 Fortune Global Forum is yet another big moment in a series of big, important moments for our economy and for our people. Just look at the past few months. This summer, we hosted the world's political leaders at the G7 in Charlevoix, Quebec, to talk about how best to create an economy that works for everyone. Just a few weeks ago, we made tremendous progress on trade with two of our closest partners. We reached an agreement in principle with the US and Mexico on a new, modernized trade pact, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. The USMCA will ensure continued free and fair trade across North America and create new opportunities for Canadian businesses and entrepreneurs. It's an agreement that will benefit our economy and strengthen our middle class. Today is another important moment for Canada, with business leaders and CEOs from around the globe here to talk business, investment, and innovation. Et le mois prochain, nous poursuivrons cette conversation lorsque Montréal accueillera le sommet international Fortune Most Powerful Women. J'ai hâte de participer à cet événement qui, j'en suis certain, donnera lieu à des discussions très productives. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all just a start. Every day, momentum grows as Canada takes the lead on the world stage and drives growth here at home. So when I say that this is a big moment for the Canadian economy, here are just a few numbers to back it up. Canada's unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in 40 years. 600,000 more Canadians are working today than at this time 2 years ago. And wages are growing at their fastest rate in close to a decade. Those workers are powering success across the board. Our economy is one of the best performing in the G7. Not only that, but Canada has the lowest net debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7, less than half the average of the other G7 nations. As you all know, that's the marker of a strong fiscal foundation. My friends, Canada's recent economic success is not a coincidence. It's a direct result of making smart, targeted investments in Canadian innovation and in Canadian communities. We took action to grow the economy by boosting consumer confidence, lowering taxes for the middle class, and putting more money back into the pockets of Canadians. Our next step was giving Canadians the tools they need for the jobs of the future and investing nearly $1 billion in 5 supercluster regions that will serve as global innovation hubs. We're also making historic investments in fundamental science to support innovation, introducing a regulatory reform agenda, lowering taxes for small businesses, and offering greater support for women in the workforce. Et bien sûr, nous n'accomplissons pas ce travail tout seuls. Comme gouvernement, nous savons qu'en travaillant avec les chefs d'entreprise, nous pouvons transformer les défis en possibilités. Vous jouez un rôle premier dans notre plan visant à créer une croissance durable et profitable pour les familles, tout comme pour les entreprises. As we establish and implement our long-term strategic vision for Canada, we're already seeing impressive results. 2 weeks ago, I was in Vancouver to announce the single largest private sector investment in Canadian history, $40 billion to build a major liquefied natural gas project in northern BC. This is truly an international project, a joint venture between 5 companies from 5 different countries. And it comes on the heels of other recent major investments by companies like SAP, Siemens, Salesforce, Toyota, Amazon, Microsoft, and Thomson Reuters, to name just a few. The LNG project is a great example of how, all at the same time, we can attract global investment, create jobs, and fight climate change with progressive environmental policies like putting a price on pollution and introducing a world-class oceans protection plan. LNG produces half the carbon emissions of coal, and this specific project will mean 10,000 good jobs for Canadians at the height of construction. Andy Kalitz, the CEO of LNG Canada, who's with us today, will do a fantastic job on this project. On top of this historic investment, our huge progress on trade with the USMCA will support working people in every sector of the economy and ensure that Canadian businesses have access to a market of 470 million people. Between this agreement, CETA, CPTPP, and our other trade agreements, Canada now has preferred market access to 2/3 of the global economy. Indeed, we're the only G7 country with a free trade deal with every other G7 country. Nous sommes également le seul pays du G7 à avoir conclu des accords commerciaux avec tous les autres membres du G7. Cet accès unique assure la position du Canada au sein d'un réseau commercial mondial qui profite à tout le monde. Parce que ce ne sont pas seulement les Canadiens eux-mêmes qui prennent note de la prospérité qui découle du commerce progressiste et diversifié, les entreprises en prennent note aussi. Well, I'm looking forward to talking more about the Canadian advantage in my discussion with Alan, because this is Canada's moment to lead, and we're making it easy for you to lead with us. La nouvelle Banque de l'infrastructure du Canada aide les gens du secteur privé à nouer des partenariats avec le gouvernement en vue de réaliser des grands projets d'infrastructure. Notre stratégie en matière de compétences mondiales aide les entreprises à attirer les meilleurs talents du monde en permettant aux entreprises de faire venir au Canada les plus brillants et talentueux en aussi peu de temps que 2 semaines. Just in case you doubt your high school French, let me repeat that one right there. Our new global skills strategy will allow companies from around the world to bring in their top talent and set up shop in Canada in 2 weeks. Our new Invest in Canada agency is a one-stop shop for international businesses looking to invest with us. On that note, let me recognize Ian McKay, the CEO of Invest in Canada, who's just come from another Fortune event in Japan to be here with us this afternoon, and who's doing outstanding work in his role. But there's even more that creates the Canadian advantage and makes our country and our people competitive. Canada is home to one of the most highly educated and diverse workforces in the world, a workforce that's constantly innovating and knows how to elevate a company to the cutting edge. Nos systèmes bancaires et juridiques sont incroyablement stables pour les citoyens comme pour les investisseurs, et nos communautés fortes et multiculturelles sont des endroits où les gens veulent vivre, travailler et élever leur famille. Mesdames et messieurs, que vous souhaitiez chercher un endroit pour établir une nouvelle usine de fabrication, explorer différentes avenues pour faire croître votre entreprise ou choisir une nouvelle ville pour installer le siège de votre entreprise, pensez à ce que le Canada peut vous offrir. The conditions are right for Canada to cement our status as a global economic leader. This is Canada's moment. And you're all here because you're interested in being a part of it. Together, we can and will drive the progress that defines our generation here in Canada and right around the world. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks for being with us.
Alan.
You talked, I really do appreciate you hosting this conference, by the way. It was an important announcement you made in Guangzhou a year ago, and I think we're all happy to be here with you today.
Well, I want to thank Fortune for realizing that it would be a great opportunity to bring the world to Canada to see exactly what it is we're doing and how they can be part of it.
We're happy to be here. You talked about the USMCA.
New NAFTA.
It's going to take us a while. Are you calling it the new NAFTA?
No, I call it the USMCA because that's a great new name that I think makes a real difference in the quality of the accord.
I want to talk about the outcome and what it means for Canada, and then I want to talk a little bit about the process, but we'll do the outcome first.
Oh, sure. Outcome, what it basically means is we have secured access to the U.S. market, quite frankly, at a time where a lot of the investors I talked to around the world were wondering whether or not we'd be able to secure that. I mean, obviously, the U.S. is going through, as it does from time to time, a bit of a protectionist phase, and being able to ensure that investments in Canada will continue to have preferential access to the extraordinary market that is the United States is a really big and important thing.
So it eliminates uncertainty, but does it put you ahead of where you were 2 years ago?
I think eliminating uncertainty or reducing uncertainty significantly does put us ahead of where we were a few years ago. And I think on other areas, ensuring, for example, that Canadian cultural exceptions continue to be protected in a digital world, looking at improvements to the auto sector that will raise labor prices in Mexico and therefore continue to make Canada's auto industry competitive. There have been significant improvements that we've secured. Obviously, the biggest thing, though, is actually getting to a solid deal that is going to provide the stability that investors around the world who see all the advantages of Canada. I mean, I've had this conversation so many times over the past 2 years with many of you in this room who I've seen a number of times who've said, yeah, you guys are doing all the right things, but are you going to fix this NAFTA thing? And I said, yeah. We will, and we did, and we did, and we will move forward.
So can we talk about the process a little bit? Because I can't recall in the 4 decades I've been watching trade negotiations anything quite like it among allies. The President of the United States, he had some choice adjectives for you. I won't repeat them, but it was a pretty tough process. Any lasting effect of that? Or is it all just to be forgotten?
I think what people will remember is where we ended up. I think in negotiations, people have different styles in their approach. We focused on staying constructive, thoughtful, present, at the table, patient, and
you're speaking about your own position, not anyone else's, right?
I made sure that our team stayed constructive.
So the one thing that I think has become very clear in the last week is that the main goal of U.S. trade policy today is not really about Canada. It's not really about Mexico. It's not really about cars or even steel and aluminum. It's really focused on China. And there was a clause slipped into the USMCA to that effect, talking about non-market economies. It didn't say China, but we all know it was meant to mean China. What's your view of that? I mean, you have an audience full of business people who are trying to operate in the world and understand what the new rules of the global economy are. What's the lesson that you take from that?
I mean, I think, first of all, that there should be rules in the global economy. We need to, and we've convened groups to work on updating the rules around the WTO, moving forward in a way that it's not about might automatically winning, that we have rules that can be trusted to be abided by both countries and by investors, and that's an important piece of it. On the specific clause that you mentioned in the USMCA, it basically says that if we are to move forward on a free trade deal with China, we would have to advise our trading neighbors, our co-NAFTA members, on what we're doing. And that's entirely reciprocal.
Just
so
notification.
Well, it's let them know, and as you well know, within this USMCA, as was the case with NAFTA, any country can give 6 months' notice and pull out for whatever reason, whether they give a reason or not. But the idea that we would give notice is now something reciprocal. I don't think you would imagine that if the U.S. were to move forward on a free trade deal with China, that they would instantly think of, yeah, but we better check in and keep Canada up to date on that. Well, now we've secured that we will be aware on this, which is something we would.
But tell me how you think about this issue. I don't know if Francois-Philippe Champagne
is right here.
Right there. Okay, Minister of International Trade Diversification.
No, that's Jim Carr.
Oh, Jim Carr. I'm sorry, Minister of Infrastructure. I'm sorry to confuse you. I meant Jim Carr. Jim Carr, so Minister of International Trade Diversification. I think the Americans in the room know what that means. the next place to go is China.
Yeah, and we have been, over the past years, increasing our trading relationship with China, and we will continue to in thoughtful ways. Obviously, China is the world's second largest economy and growing, and will remain an important place to do business and to look for opportunities. We will continue to look for that, but we will continue to do it in the way that Canada always has, mindful about the challenges, both of scale and of different approaches to business, in a way that is thoughtful about drawing benefit and protections for Canada.
The bigger context here, of course, is not just US, Canada, China. You have rising levels of tribalism, nativism, protectionism, nationalism happening around the world. What's your advice to this group of global business people who were, learned their trade in a different, the post-World War II global system? What's your advice to them how to proceed?
Well, first of all, I've spoken with a lot of folks who exactly that are really worried about the rising protectionism all around the world. And to those people, I point out that in 3 years, Canada was able to close a free trade deal with Europe. We were able to get a good deal that we actually improved on the CPTPP. And we've moved forward on saving NAFTA, or breaking the USMCA. We did 3 major trade deals at a time where trade deals aren't very much in fashion anymore. How did we do that? We did that by, throughout, emphasizing and demonstrating that we get one of the problems with trade that people haven't talked about nearly enough. Because we all know, you all know better than just about anyone, that trade creates growth. But trade in itself won't do anything to make sure that the benefits of that growth accrue to everyone. We have far too many people in countries around the world who feel that the benefits of growth in their country, through trade and other things, have passed them by. And we made very specific arguments in favor of trade that highlighted the benefits to small businesses, the benefits to workers, the benefits to Canadian families, in a way that brings them along. And there is a confidence amongst Canadians about trade because they know that we are thinking about the shared benefits of trade and not just the benefits to a company or a country or a corporate bottom line.
Shared benefits is a big part of what you talked about in your remarks, and it is the core theme of this conference. Trade may be a piece of that, but most analysts I talk to think technology may be an even bigger piece of that. So
Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit about what the Canadian approach is to dealing with the technology challenge? And the challenge sort of exists on 2 levels. There's one group of people who fear that AI, machine learning, sensors on everything will eliminate jobs. And then there's another group of people that think there's kind of a winner-take-all dynamic in it, which will increase inequality. How in Canada do you, those are unbelievable socks, by the way. They're like in my, yeah, but I can't possibly compete with that. But.
Okay, to get back to the matter at hand. Well, first of all, confidence in people, and before we even get into technology, and there's a lot of interesting things we're doing around that, giving people confidence in their own future and their kids' future, most importantly, because there's a lot of folks who are working incredibly hard because they think they're going to give their kids a better shot than they ever had. That's the immigrant story all around the world. That's something that people can relate to. And if people are really worried about their kids' future, that's a problem. So one of the first things we did when we came in was we lowered taxes for the middle class and raised them on the wealthiest 1%. We brought in a family benefit, a Canada Child benefit, that gives significant money to low and middle class families for groceries, for back to school supplies with kids, so that they can have more confidence in their kids' future. And that actually is a real tangible thing that has led to us having the best growth rate in the G7 last year, because there is significant positive consumer confidence. And I know that when the middle class has more money in their pockets, businesses will always find a way to flourish in an economy that's working like that. But the other piece of it is a really important one, which is how people feel about technology. We know that robotics, AI, technological advances are rapidly disrupting and transforming the nature of work and the workplace. This is, as many people have called it, a fourth industrial revolution. Well, we know what happens with industrial revolutions. There is a transition time in which a whole bunch of people get disrupted right out of their jobs. And then once it's through that transition time, there are better quality jobs and more jobs on the outside of it for everyone. So our challenge in Canada, any country, has two choices with that. You can either drag your heels and try and hold on to the model that we have to cause the minimum amount of disruption for a long time, but of course eventually you'll fall off the cliff when you do have to get disrupted, or else you say, well, it's coming, so let's dive right into it. Let's lead the way. And the investments we're making in AI, Canada is a significant AI hub in Toronto, Montreal, and Edmonton, because we have great people there and we're bringing in more. We're significant in technology, the Kitchener-Waterloo corridor from Toronto, other places, Vancouver being sort of an extension of Seattle to the north, although getting physical links is on deck for where we get there, right? There are a lot of things we're doing that is saying, let's figure out what this next world looks like by shaping it, by owning it, by being excited about it. So what does that mean? We're investing in science massively, we're investing in technology, but we're also investing in skills training, whether it's post-secondary education or trade schools for young people to be able to get those tools, but also for people who are in the workforce now who want to maybe leave their job before it dead ends so they can retrain and support their families so that they can go back to school. We're really investing in access to education in a way that will make people feel empowered about the next generation. Although we already have more STEM graduates in the province of Ontario, where you are now, than they do in California.
Well, I know Jim Smith, the CEO of Thomson Reuters, said they moved back to Canada from New York because of the access to AI talent. So it's an interesting example. Can you talk about how your commitment to women in the workplace fits into that? I mean, you've made an extraordinary commitment in government. What, half your cabinet is female? Which may be unheard of.
No, there's a few countries that are starting to realize that it's not just about leadership and showing that it can be done. It's actually really, really smart to have a more diverse board, cabinet, organization, because you get better points of view. If you can imagine trying to solve a problem with 10 people who all went to the same school, grew up in the same neighborhood, that you're trying to get them to think outside the box and they don't even know they're inside the same box. Whereas you bring people from every corner of the world, you bring people with vastly different experiences to weigh in on a problem with different approaches, you actually get to solve those problems in more creative and more thoughtful ways. And the first way to do that is to recognize that women bring to an organization, to leadership roles, a whole different set of perspectives, experiences, and abilities that is not just the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. And more companies are doing that because, not because people are demanding it from the outside, but because they see it's an opportunity to create better growth.
Did you commit to 50-50 up front, or did it just turn out that way?
No, I committed to 50-50 up front, and because committing to 50-50 up front, before it could be 2015, and I could say because it's 2015, as you might remember from the clip, it had to be 2014, 2013, 2012. We had to go out and recruit extraordinary women and convince them to run for politics, because you know it's harder to get women to run for politics than it is to get a man to run for politics. You ask a man if he wants to run for politics, his first question is, what took you so long? You ask a woman to run for politics, her first question is, really, do you think I'm qualified? Why me? Are you sure? Would I be? I mean, Chrystia Freeland, who is like a hero to everyone now because of what she's been able to do on the USMCA, it took me, weeks and weeks of conversations to try and convince her to run, and she did, and we're all the better for it.
Well, Chrystia also got some attention because she was one of the first to sort of to call out Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia for some of the things he was doing to female protesters. That's now exploded into a very big issue with the death of this journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. How are you, and of course it caused some problems for Canada because Saudi Arabia talked about pulling people out of the country. How are you thinking about that now?
Canada will always be very firm, and we'll try to be polite because it's not just a cliche, but very firm about standing up for human rights all around the world, because Canadians expect it of our government, but the world also expects it of Canada, to be a clear voice saying, you know what, this is right or this is wrong, and you need to do better. And we don't take kindly to being, to having people try to punish us for believing what we say in, and we'll be firm.
Where do you stand now? Where do you stand now in terms of relations with Saudi Arabia?
We, as I've expressed a number of times, are real concern on the reports coming out in the situation of this journalist. We're very much working with our allies in the international community to try and bring forward a concerted, or at least an aligned response as we learn more about the situation. It's still early days, and you don't want to make a mistake on this, but obviously this is something that has highlighted real concerns for an awful lot of people, and let's just say I'm glad that we're having these conversations in the open now.
Why don't we open it up if anybody has a question or a comment from the audience? I think there's some microphones out there. Happy, I have a lot more, but if they're right here up front, please. Yeah.
Hello, sir. My name is Peter Hawkins. I'm from the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and I want to know if you could talk about Mercosur and the negotiations going on there.
Absolutely, because securing access to 2/3 of the world's GDP, preferred access to 2/3 of the world's GDP, wasn't enough for Canada. We are moving forward with trade deals with South America. We are moving forward on the Pacific Alliance expanded trade deal. We already have deals with the individually most of the west coast of South America. We're now moving forward with the Mercosur countries, Argentina, Brazil, and others, to secure preferential access and trade with them. And we're moving in a very positive direction. Discussions are moving forward well, and I look forward to continuing those discussions in person at the G20 down in Buenos Aires in about a month.
Others? Can you, while we're...
Right there.
Right there? Good.
Sure. Great, yeah. So I'm Jospa Petrinic. I'm the director of the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium. So great job on the Supercluster initiative last year. It certainly put Canada on the map. But one of the things your government articulated was a commitment to transportation innovation. And I think a lot of us were disappointed when nothing came out the door for transportation innovation. Can you give us a sense, given climate change, your carbon tax fight that's coming down the pipeline, and the dedication to transportation innovation in your government going forward? What can we see?
Actually, one of the things we got elected on 3 years ago was a commitment to make the largest investment in Canadian history in public transit. And we are moving forward in significant ways on partnerships in Montreal with the REM, in Toronto, in big cities and smaller communities right across the country in investing in public transit and in transportation. We're updating our trade hubs, whether it's airports or ports, or highway systems and bridges. We have put forward the largest infrastructure investments in Canadian history, but we know that there's always more to do, which is why we put together a global, a Canadian infrastructure hub, which is all about connecting the significant amounts of global capital out there with long, positive return investments in a stable country like Canada that we can have. So this is something that we continue to invest in. Yes, we are also moving forward with putting a price on pollution. We don't think that pollution should continue to be free. We're going to make sure that right across the country there is a price on pollution to make sure that polluters are paying their fair share and make sure that we are motivated to innovate and develop those kinds of solutions that will lead to better transportation and transit solutions.
That's a tough political issue for you, isn't it? I mean, some people think that's the issue that could really cause you problems.
You know what? I think from the amount of conversations I've had with Canadians, if they have again, a choice between one party that says we need to both build the economy and protect the environment at the same time, and another party that still thinks that the only way to build the economy is to ignore the environment, that's a fight I'm willing to have.
Yeah.
Because if the Conservatives don't want to put a cost on pollution, want to continue to make pollution free, I think they're going to have a hard time convincing Canadians of that, particularly because they don't have much of a plan at all on fighting climate change.
Question right here in front. Can we get a microphone?
Here, microphone. Merci. Hi, my name is Caroline Kotze. I am the president of Women in Governance. This morning there was a roundtable discussion around the effectiveness of boards, and obviously the question of diversity was brought up. There was a gentleman from California who talked about the legislation, the recent legislation in California requesting that boards add at least a woman, and with time 2 or 3. We have had these discussions, you and I, in the past, and the openness to legislation was not much there. And I was just wondering if, A, the thought around this has evolved, and B, if you were, and I see the gentleman from California laughing at the other end, and B, if you realize that actually a lot of corporate Canada is in favor now. There was a gentleman this morning who was saying that we wish it changed on its own, but it's quite obvious that with 45% of publicly traded organizations that have 0 women on their boards, something needs to be done.
I'll be honest, when we first took office 2 years ago and were making this pitch for better gender equality, particularly in the corporate world on boards and in governance structures, we got a lot of pushback from our corporate partners and our corporate friends who said, no, don't do this. But over the past 2 years, 3 years, the conversation has really changed, and the leadership shown by so many of you in this room and in the corporate world, that understanding that it's just a smart thing to do means that we are definitely looking at ways of strengthening our commitment to better gender parity. Canada has a great reputation because we have a feminist prime minister, but in the actual numbers, we're not doing nearly as well as we should be, and that's something that I absolutely want to tackle, not because of values, but because of tangible benefits and growth and reasons of equality. Giving everyone a fair chance to succeed is something that everyone expects.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you at dinner tonight.
Looking forward to it. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you, Alan.